Hey guys, welcome back to the This Is Soul Skate Shop YouTube channel. I'm Ivo, and in this video I'll explain you what things to consider when you're buying an aggressive inline skate frame. This is kind of like the eternal struggle for all aggressive inline skaters, is that they can never find a good frame, or maybe you're the opposite type of person and you're just satisfied with any type of frame. It all depends a little bit about your budget. If you don't have a lot of money, my advice, the simple answer, the simple summary of this video is just take any frame and deal with it and you'll be fine. If you do have money to invest, there's a whole world of frame possibilities, and every frame will ride a little bit different. It will give some grinds a little bit more of a benefit, and it will make some grinds a little bit harder. It will sometimes make rolling a lot nicer, or it will sometimes make rolling a lot harder. And then it's fun to play around with that balance with all those options, but you'll find in the end that there's no perfect solution. So let me at least go through all the different type of categories that there are. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of aggressive skate frames, and I hope that in the end of the video you'll be a lot wiser and can make better choices. Well, an aggressive skate frame is of course a frame with small wheels, but you already probably knew that. Usually they have about like 60mm wheels. They're usually made of plastic, and they usually have the UFS frame mounting standard. So any frame in any size of any brand will fit on any boot in any size of any brand. So that's really cool. Aggressive frames always have an H block, and the H block is this thing here in the middle, and if you look at it like this, it spells the letter H, so that's why it's called the H block. Then frames can be made out of different materials. Of course, there's plastic and there's metal frames, but there's also a different type of plastics and different thicknesses of that plastic. In the past, there have been experiments with UHMW frames. This is like a certain type of plastic, but somehow has like a marketing name within our sport that everybody still remembers as that it slides really well. But usually those frames also have axles that come loose a little bit after a while. So not that they turn loose, but they can wiggle a little bit because the plastic is sometimes a little bit too weak. Of course, not for all UHMW frames, but at least a couple ones of the famous ones, they turned out to be not the best frames. So in general, if we're talking about material, my advice would be to just get a normal plastic frame. That's the best for grinding, and you'll still be able to ride nicely on it. Nice, good. The advantage of a metal frame is that it rides a lot smoother because the frame walls are of course super stiff, so there's no energy loss in like the movement of the frame itself. And maybe you think now when you hear this like, movement of the frame, that doesn't do that much. Let me show you. Here I have a metal frame, and if I squeeze this, I cannot squeeze these walls together actually. Maybe like a 0.5 millimeter, all right? Then if I take a standard frame from the standard brand, I can move it a little bit. You see, that's like a 2 or 3 millimeter. But then if I take a weak Featherlight, ground control Featherlight frame, I can push this all the way like even like a centimeter or something. So when you skate, every time you move your foot sideways, this frame will just bend and it will absorb your energy because bending is not free. You have to pay for it in energy, and it will make you go slower. Well, if you like going slow, that doesn't matter. If you like going fast, take a metal frame. Downside of metal frames is that they don't grind so well, I would say. You might have some stick-ups. Some people say it's fine. I'm skeptical. That's why they put in a plastic H block. Definitely, if you grind on concrete stuff, then I would say plastic is a lot better. If you grind maybe only on copings, only on rails that are from metal, then maybe metal is okay. Also, a trend in the last couple of years is to have a metal frame with a plastic cover. So also actually for the solar frames, that's now possible to put like a plastic slider here, or a grind plate. And another example is, let me see where it is, the 50/50 core frames, of course, which have a metal frame, so it's nice and stiff, but there's a plastic cover which makes it grind nice. So this is probably a little bit the holy grail if we're just talking about materials. Okay, now let's go through all the frames that are on the market, and there are 5 categories that I'm gonna throw them each in. These categories are not common knowledge. I have to maybe make them up a little bit. but I think everybody listening to this video will probably understand the categories. So first category is just a classic flat frame. Just a really normal classic flat frame. That's just, you can find it from the 90s, from the zeros, from the 10s era. Then a classic anti-rocker frame, also just very straightforward. Then there's flat frames that have like protected H blocks which wrap around the wheels a little bit. Then there's high-low frames which have bigger wheels on the outside and smaller on the inside. And then as the last category, there are freestyle aggressive frames which don't have any possibility to put in a wheel in the middle at all. For each of those categories, I'll explain to you first what the ride pleasure is and what the grind pleasure is. Of course, it differentiates a little bit from frame to frame, the design of the frame, the material of the frame, these aspects, but I'm just gonna lump everything together to make it a little bit easy for you. Let's start with a little bit of a history lesson, because if you look at this channel more often, and I think you should of course subscribe if you like it, then you know that I'll always throw in a little bit of history, and that history almost always begins with me grabbing one of our rental skates, because we are here in the Disasol skate shop, of course, in Amsterdam. We have a store in Berlin as well, and in our 2 stores we have rental skates. These rental skates, I want them to be classic, kind of like Converse All-Stars, classical skates, just normal all-round recreational skates, because we're close to the Vondelpark, which is a very central park in Amsterdam. Yeah, this is the skate we use, but this is also the first skate where people started doing tricks in. I think it was in the 80s, like 87, the first skate came with a buckle, and then early 90s, the first movie, Dare to Air, came out. This was not the Roche skate, but it was like a rollerblade skate. And these skates were not meant to grind on at all, but they did it. In the first movie where you see grinding is Dare to Air, they did it anyway. And it happened to be so that in the box of that rollerblade skate, there was a little wrench. That was the wrench that you used to unscrew the axles. And that wrench was exactly big enough to be put in between those axles. So you could actually take the axles off, put the wrench in, screw the axles back in, and then you had like a reinforcement of the frame. Because if you're gonna go grinding on a frame like this, which is really not made for it, really thin and really brittle plastic, you're gonna destroy a frame really quickly. And back then, all the frames were riveted on the boot, so there was no replacement, so you had to buy a completely new skate. So that was kind of like the invention of the grind plate. And here you see it in this skate as well. There's a grind plate attached to it to make it better for grinding. We put this on just for the looks, because I like the look, it's classic. Pretty quickly after that movie came out in '93, the first Roches M12 and kind of like the hardware evolution of aggressive skates started. And here you see also the first H block. There's a block in the middle, it's the white block. It spells the letter H and it enforces the frame. So it's kind of like an internal grind plate in that way. But also the wall thickness is a lot thicker. So you'll keep these frames better a lot longer. Then this is a little bit of a side note. This is kind of like an M12 boot, but then with the metal frame. Not sure what year this was, maybe 97 or something. Maybe it was 96. It's a frame that looks a lot like the Sola frame. I made a video just about comparing these two, so if you want to dive into that, you can on our channel. And starting 97, there were so many skates suddenly on the market. For example, this Salomon skate, the Roches Fifth Element, of course. Oxygen had a skate, Bauer had a skate, K2 came with the Fetty, the Rollerblade Canvas, the Rollerblade Dirk. Man, in 1 year, there were suddenly 10 new brands, and all these brands started to compete with each other and experiment. This is a skate from the year 2000. It's actually the first UFS skate. So this is the first skate that ever came out where you can unscrew the frame here underneath the wheel, boom, take it off, and then put any of these frames on it. Cool thing is that in those couple of years, starting 97, 96, the split in the middle also became bigger. And here you see even that you can put them in 2 different positions. So there's a frame spacer inside that you can flip. And by flipping it, it also makes it a little bit more maneuverable if you put it in the middle, or if you put it on the outside, you can grind better because you have a bigger groove. But this frame that you see here, this is kind of like what I mean when I say it's a standard frame. But also, this is maybe a little bit of the OG standard frame. So it has a really small groove here. This one is even completely flat if you look at it like this. But if you look at it like this, there's a small groove. This one has also just a little bit of a small groove. And in a way, this is still the standard. It's such the standard that the standard skate brand that just came out with a frame that's almost exactly the same as those 25-year-old skates from the late 90s in how the groove is set up. So that's the first category. You can skate these standard frames anti-rocker, like this one, you see it, it's set up as an anti-rocker, or you can skate them flat. They are not the worst flat frames. Usually they have pretty thick walls, so that's nice. If you want to have a good flat frame, you want to have this little point actually sticking away as far away from the wheel as possible. This is, for example, a dam skate. Here you see that the groove is bigger, but this little point is also closer to the wheel, which makes it actually a less good of a flat frame, because you want to have that distance between the groove and the wheel to prevent wheel bite. All right, let's go through all the different frames in this category. This is the current Roches stock frame. It's 100% the same frame as this one. It would be exactly as if you would take this frame off and make it a UFS. This is also, in a way, the worst aggressive skate frame that there is right now, because it does not have frame spacers. And because it does not have frame spacers and the axles are really, really weak and only 6 millimeters, me with my weight at least, maybe for a small kid, but if you're above 50 kilograms and you skate this frame, the axles will start to rattle. And so this is definitely the worst frame, but you could upgrade it if you drill a hole and put in frame spacers and put in a better axle, then it's actually just a good frame. The modern Roches frame is this one. So on almost all skates, except for the cheapest ones, comes this frame. So the team skates and the pro skates have most likely this frame. I think this is called just, I think it's the second generation stock frame, because this is then the first generation stock frame. You can skate this one again flat or anti-rocker. This is a really versatile frame. This is probably the frame that's the most underrated in our industry, because people tend to take it off and put on a different frame. So it's also really cheap. So if you don't have a lot of money and you want to get like a frame that's actually really good, this is the one. We of course have it at Disasol Skate Shop a lot, but maybe we don't have it on our website. So if you want this, just reach out to our customer support. Then let's go to 50/50. This is the 50/50 Balance 1 frame. 50/50 is, together with Kaiser, one of the OG frame brands in aggressive skating, and the Balance 1 frame came out a long time ago. They had different versions. First, it was not like symmetrical. So now you see that this side and this side is the same. So you can flip the frame and put it probably in 4 different ways on the skates. On the left skate in 2 different ways, and on the right skate in 2 different ways. Same goes for all the other frames here on the market. But when 50/50 came out, that was not the standard yet. And the frames were asymmetrical. So the front was actually pointing more forward and the back was pointing more backwards. All those old frames that 50/50 made were discontinued, but this one is like a legendary frame. And when 50/50 came back a couple of years ago, I don't know what year actually, 2018 maybe, they brought back the 50/50 Balance 1 frame. And 50/50 was gone for a while, but they've been doing a lot of cool stuff. For example, they made the Balance 2 frame. So this is the Balance 2 frame. In my opinion, this is about the same frame as the Balance 1 frame. Not much difference, but for the axles, have like an axle which only needs 1 Allen key. So that's fine, that's nice. All right, so that's the Balance 1 and Balance 2. And then 50/50 has, of course, the metal frame, which I already talked about. Here you see that the groove is a lot bigger. I still put it a little bit in this category, but I would put it maybe also in the category of anti-rocker frames, because this is more of an anti-rocker frame than a flat frame. I think if you're riding flat on this, you're really brave. That also goes for all of these classical grind aggressive frames. If you're skating flat on them, I think it's brave. Yeah, later we're going to go to a category which is a lot better if you want to ride flat. These are more the frames for yeah, if you want to maybe try a little bit both, ride flat sometimes, experiment with the anti-rocker. They're also usually a little bit cheap, these frames, not always. So the ride experience is good if you have flat. The grind experience is for both flat and both for anti-rocker setups with these frames, not the best, but doable. So that's my rating. I'm gonna give all these categories a rating, okay? The last couple of frames in this category are the metal frames. So we talked about the Sola frame. Here it is. And then let's compare it to the ground control HD frames. There's a big height difference. This one sits a lot lower to the boot. And there's also a width difference. So maybe you can see it like this best, if I put it next to each other. The HD frames are a lot wider. And maybe that's actually better for grinding, because you want to have this little piece away from the wheel as far as possible. But I know that the riders that skate on Sola like the elegance of the slimness. So that's up to you. These are all personal choices. And it's fun to experiment those, of course, for yourself. And then there's one more frame that I just put in with the other classical frames, and that's the flat frame. Of course, it's not classical at all, because there's also a little bit of an angle in it. So the back is higher than the front. So in that way, it's not symmetrical. There's actually a front and a back. And it's designed to look a little bit like a wizard frame, but it's not, because it has really small wheels. Looks like a cool product. Most of these frames that have like a replaceable H-block, by the way, they have like metal versions and plastic versions. So that also goes for ground control and for Sola. Next category are the classical anti-rocker frames. If you're new to aggressive skating and you want to learn to grind, there's no way to make grinding easier than getting a classic anti-rocker frame. The groove is usually about the same shape as a rail. So that means that if you lock on the rail, you're nice and locked on the groove. So you'll have a really good lock. And the first wheel you'll encounter is really far. So talking about wheel bite, if you're on an edge like this and you lean forward, the idea is that the first thing you hit is that grind wheel here. These frames have two names. They have the name anti-rocker wheel, and they have the, wacht. These wheels have two names. They have the name grind wheels, because they are wheels made for grinding, and they have the name anti-rocker wheels. And what actually a lot of aggressive skaters don't know, I think by now this is changing, but that anti-rocker comes from being the opposite of a rocker. And a rocker is when the two middle wheels are bigger and the frame can move forward, back and forth a little bit, because it's actually unstable because the outer wheels are a little bit smaller. It also makes it maneuverable. And having an anti-rocker, having the wheels in the middle a lot smaller, will actually also have the opposite effect in that it will make your skate less maneuverable. So the biggest downside in skating an anti-rocker frame is that it's super slow because you're only on two wheels, but it's also not maneuverable. And to counter that, most aggressive skaters have developed a certain hop. And it's really funny, if you're observing skaters, you can tell them without looking to their skates, you can see if somebody rides flat or if somebody rides anti-rocker. Because if you ride flat, you can do this, just steer inwards and then move outwards and push. But if you skate anti-rocker, you have to ride and then kind of like hop and then push. So they have like hop, push, hop, push. So it's like an extra like little dance move that aggressive skaters have. You have to watch an aggressive skater who has anti-rocker in the skateboarding exam, and you'll know what I mean. That's funny. If you're actually getting used to that, that's no problem. I've skated anti-rocker almost my whole life. I love anti-rocker. It's definitely the best way to learn grinding. It makes grinding easier, and grinding is fun, and I want grinding to be easy. I'll never stop loving anti-rocker. Let's go through the different anti-rocker frames on the market. First, let me just summarize that almost all of them are probably a little bit the same. So it's hard to really go wrong here. The biggest no-no, I think, for me is the flexibility of this Federlite frame. So I would definitely put that one last on the list of aggressive frames if you're going to choose some. Ground Control also made a lot stronger anti-rocker frame. It's called the XS frame. It's been discontinued. We still have a couple, so maybe if you're lucky you can get it. It's a little bit stronger, so that's definitely the better version, but it's also heavier. Then, of course, some of the classical frames are just really good anti-rocker frames as well, like we already discussed, like This is actually a really good anti-rocker frame. It's perfect. I think this is probably one of the best anti-rocker frames on the market. Of course, the 50/50 prime frames, really good anti-rocker frame. Then the Create original frames. It's nice and light because it saves the material here in the top, but the ends are really stiff. So you go actually pretty fast on these because they're so stiff. So that's nice. Of course, not as stiff as a metal frame. Then we have the new Roches frame. It's called the RF frame. The groove sits a lot deeper than the like normal Roches frame. See the difference? The groove is a lot deeper. So that's nice. You have a nice lock. This is the perfect anti-rocker frame as well. It's super stiff because it has these extra walls here. These walls here in the middle, these make all the difference. So you can see that, for example, this frame does not have that. It has the wheel holding it together, but having an extra wall there really makes it that these walls don't go together. Also, let me compare it to Create Original frames. Yeah, you see the Create Original frame also don't have a wall, and if I compare it, it makes so much difference. Here the Create Original frames I can still like move a half centimeter, and this one I can only move like 1 millimeter. Probably one of the best frames on the market if you're talking about just a basic anti-rocker frame is this EDF-1 Roches frame. One of my all-time favorites though is the Kaiser Fluid 4 frame. Also, there's no wall here, so it's very comparable to the Create Original frames in how strong it is, and the dimensions of the groove, that's all fine. Everything is good, no problem. Material-wise, if you're talking like what grinds the fastest, probably there's going to be a lot of people out there thinking that like, this frame is this and this frame is that. Definitely you can notice some difference between Ground Control and Kaiser, but in general, if you're new to this, I would not worry about that. Like all these frames, they grind, they will slide. The next category of frames is flat frames with protection for the inner wheels. And that protection is of course to have less wheel bite. The first frame that I know that had this was the Abel frame. I actually have one set left. It's on the website. We've had it for years on the website. Nobody buys it. It's also not super cheap because we have one and it's kind of like a legendary frame. So yeah, I don't need to get rid of it, you know, because I really think this is a really cool frame. And here you see that there's this line of the frame wall and it goes up. So there's a little bit of extra protection for the groove. After that, I think Caltech was second with their flat frame. This is a Caltech frame. We made a collabo with Caltech as well when it first came out. So this is pretty cool. And then it had the Disasol logo here. The Caltech frame, however, is really thin here on this side. And you want to have the groove as far away from the wheel as possible to prevent wheel bite. And if it's really close, then you only have to do like a little bit of something of a move, and then the wheel is still against the obstacle that you're grinding on. So a lot of people prefer frames with thicker walls, where this frame actually has a line like this. It would be better for if it was more thicker on the top. So you can see that with other frames that it's actually thicker on the top. This, for example, is a frame that sells a lot now. It's the T-neck frame. Here you see it, just like the Abel frame, that it goes up, but the groove in the middle is made as wide as possible. So normally on like an anti-rocker frame, you can see it if you look at it in an angle. So you can look at a frame like this, but if I look at it at 45 degrees, you see that there's still like an extra groove here on the side. And this one totally does not have that. So if I look at it like this, the split doesn't get bigger. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but I hope you know what I mean. They did a really good job in making the walls really thick here on this little edge, because this little edge, that's where you're actually grinding on, and you want to have that as far away from the wheel as possible. So T-neck, it's a great frame. Same goes for the Fluid 5. A lot of people buy the Fluid 5 now. This is kind of like a classical flat frame where all wheels are the same, and this little point here is really thick, you see it, and it's really far from the edge of the wheel. To make this edge even further, some people prefer pointier or at least round wheels. So if the wheel has a really flat profile, then this little edge comes to the ledge quicker than if it would be really slender and pointy. Again, the further away your wheel is from this little edge, the easier it is to grind. Kaltic also made a V2 of their frames, and it's about the same. Here, you see it. It's about the same because it still has a little bit of the frame walls that goes like that, but it's definitely better and well protected than the V1. So I would say that the V2 is better than the V1. You can see that it's really weak though. You see, you can easily pinch it. One new frame on the market. Boom. This is also a really popular frame. And here you see exactly what I mean, where the bottom of the frame is really slim and then it goes wider and wider if you go down. Normally it's like this, of course. That's what you want. But then here they cut it off a little bit. I would say that this frame is better for grinding if they would have made this little point further away, like a thicker, more material here. Maybe, I'm not sure of course, but maybe the reason why they did not do that is because if you make the walls really thick, so if you make like the perfect frame to grind on, it's also a little bit less of a good frame to ride on. So if you take a frame and you just put it on its side, then you see that in this angle, the frame wall hits the ground. And that's the moment that you fall if you don't know what you're doing. You can make a SES slide on it, that's called SES sliding. So it's also a trick category, is sliding on the side of your frame. But if you make a really steep turn and you have really thick side walls, then you can suddenly slide and you'll have a bad time. Maybe there's an argument to be made to make the side walls slimmer. It's always the balance between having fun riding, so being able to make steep turns, having 4 wheels, having big wheels, and then you're balancing that against being able to grind. And having like 4 times 90 or something like that probably rides the nicest, and having no wheels at all probably grinds the nicest. It's up to you to decide kind of like where you want to be in this. All I can do is tell you what the differences are between what's on the market. That's my job. Then there's one more frame, and we're gonna discuss this in the end of the video. Okay, that summarizes it for the flat frames with protection for the inner wheels category. There's loads of different options. Best sellers are right now Fluid 5 and the T-neck frames. Definitely the Icon AG60 is good, and I'll talk about the Megas later. If I make my judgment about this, is that they are really nice to ride with. So it's a lot of riding fun because you're flat, so that's really nice. Grinding, it's not as good as an anti-rocker, of course, but it's definitely not as bad as a classical flat. Then let's move to the next category, and that is what is very weirdly called freestyle frames. And it's called freestyle frames within the context of aggressive skating. So this is freestyle aggressive inline skating. But freestyle inline skating is also a category, and freestyle inline skating means flatland skating, and it's done on big wheels. So it's very confusing that the same term is used for within aggressive as within like a subcategory as inline skating as well. It's called a freestyle aggressive frame if there's no place to put in wheels. There's not too many frames on the market anymore. This was an idea of Dustin Latimer, as far as I know. It emerged on the first Shadow skate back in, what was it, maybe 2005, 2006, the first Shadow skates came out. This is now under the USD umbrella of USD Shadow with an S, but it used to be Shadow with an X. And yeah, the idea was that you're free, that there's no groove, that you can make your own groove and you can grind anything. So you have these legendary promo videos of Dustin Latimer like grinding a tree or something, because there's no limitations with this frame. That was kind of like the idea that was sold to us. So a couple years later, like 2007, 2008, basically all the skaters in the skate park skated these frames, me included, and now nobody. And the reason why is, I learned it the hard way, is if my arm is the rail and you try to lock on the frame, you'll not have a lock. So maybe you think like, I'm not good at aggressive skating. I don't know if I can land exactly here. I want to not fall if I lock here. And that's the problem, of course, if you have this frame. It's only going well if you land in the middle. If you land here, then it's sketchy and then you probably bail, okay? With this, you think that you can land anywhere, but the dissolution in it is that you never land. There's never a lock, you're never locked. So I had to learn this the hard way. When I was grinding a rail, I thought I had a lock, and then whew, I slipped out of it and fell backwards really hard. So that was the end of me skating freestyle frames like this. And I think with my choice, also those of all the other skaters of that era, one point or another, they realized that this is not the way to make an aggressive skate frame. You could make a freestyle frame, which would be a lot better, of course. Here's one for Caltech. It's called the Caltech Freestyle Frame. The edge is a little bit sharper, so that's already better than this Kaiser frame. This is called the Kaiser Type X frame, but it used to be the Shadow Moke frame when it came out. They just rebranded it to Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Type M frame. Also, it looks like you can put wheels in here, but these axles are just to hold the H block. And there's been multiple editions of this frame. Now the groove is really shallow, but there's been grooves that have been sharper. There's been multiple editions. And also you see that it's going up a little bit. So this one is definitely a lot better. If you lock on it, you'll lock a lot better, but still it's not the same than if you have this one. You cannot go out once you're in. And that's what you want. You want to be confident when you're on the rail. Once you're on it, you want to know that you're on it, okay? So for me, definitely a big no-no. Don't fall into this trap of freestyle aggressive frames. Okay, then the last category. Yeah, we made it. And this is also my advice, which I started with. Maybe I'll just show you my skate. This is a skate that I currently ride. This is called the Wish frame. You write O-Y-S-E. I don't know why they spelled it that way, but it's a high-low frame. So that's the last category of frames. It's a high-low frame. And high-low means that there's bigger wheels on the outside and smaller wheels on the inside. And by having smaller wheels on the inside, they could take the wheels more to the outside, above the frame mounting plate and the frame mounting bolts. And because there's so much room on the outside, you want to utilize that room. And they utilize it so much that this is even sunken into the boot. So you have to grind away some material out of the sole plate to mount this. This frame will not go stock on all the boots that are on the market. You have to put in some work, but I would say it's worth it, because for me, if we're talking about like balance between grinding and riding, this is the perfect mix. It's a little bit harder to grind with it than anti-rocker, okay? A little bit, but it's still really close to the anti-rocker feeling, because the groove is so big and the distance between this point here and the middle wheel is so far. It's the furthest that there's possible of any of the frames in the market. So that also makes it that the wheel is protected the most and you'll get the least amount of wheel bite. And you'll have a really nice riding experience. Maybe there's two criticisms of this frame. The first is that some people say that they like to have the wheels more in the middle because that's the more natural riding experience. I don't really agree with that. I understand what they mean, but for me that's not an obstacle. And the other thing is that some people say that it's too tall. And I think that's more of like an optical illusion because the front wheels are so big, but the front wheels are also sunken in to the boot. So it's definitely like a lot less tall than it looks. And also it's like so chunky on the bottom. So it looks really tall, but I think it's less tall than people think. And if you have a really wide sole plate, it cancels out the height because it's all about kind of like the angle that you make together with the width of your sole plate and the height of your frame. So the Razor Shift that I skate here has a really wide sole plate, so then it's fine. The angle is just about the same as if you would have like an M12 with a classical anti-rocker frame, for example. There's one more high-low frame on the market. That's the Kaiser Element 2 frame. Sola had a high-low frame, but it's not available anymore. So maybe in the future there will be more high-low frames. I hope so. I hope more brands will follow. So to summarize, the category of high-low frame, really good for grinding and really good for riding. Maybe it's not the best for grinding because that's anti-rocker, and maybe it's not the best for riding because that's probably still like 4x90, but maybe 4x46, or maybe that rides a little bit better. Maybe there's a discussion. But I think definitely on both of these spectrums, it's on the really good side of that spectrum. So high-low frames, especially the Wish frame, that's the advice. But again, it's fun to explore. So borrow your friend's frame, try it, swap the frames, because every frame fits on every boot. Then there's one more frame, the last thing of this video. That was of the poll that I put on Facebook in the beginning. That poll actually had quite a nice response, so thank you guys for that. Follow us on social media, of course, if you want to learn more about all the things that we do. And in that poll, one of the top frames that came out of it was the Ground Control Featherlight 4 frame. And we have it here. Interesting thing about this frame is that it's called the Featherlight 4 frame. And so many people have skated the Featherlight 3 frames, the Featherlight 2s and Featherlight 1s as well, but now Featherlight 3, that it kind of like makes like a natural progression, I think, naming wise. So probably the best thing about this frame is the name, because you think, hey, I've skated Featherlight 3 my whole life, let me try skating flat ones, I'll go for the Featherlight 4. So it makes a lot of sense. Actually, if you look at this frame, which has been out on the market for, I don't know, 5 years, I'm not sure. This is called the Mega frame. The Mega frame came out after the Big frame, and the Big frame was a 72mm frame. So because Big and Mega, they kind of like are a little bit the same. So the marketing of this frame was not appealing to everybody who's skating a Featherlight frame, and this one is. But if you compare these two frames, you see that it's actually a really similar frame. Actually, it is the same frame. Look at these lines here and look at these lines here. You see that it's the same line even. It's almost the same. The difference is that this one has an H-block, so you see the screws here and you can unscrew the H-block. It's kind of cool. You can put in an aluminum H-block. I don't know who would want that. This is the Ground Control HD frames, and the same H-block can be put in this one, and the Featherlight H-block can be put in the HD frame. So that's nice, but nobody wants to have a metal H-block in this. And I have also not seen anybody change it. So if you're not going to change the H-block, and also I can guarantee you that for replacement, if you're going to want to replace the H-block, you want to replace the whole frame. So replacement wise as well, it doesn't really matter. This one is so much better than the Featherlight 4 because it's solid and it's also lighter. You have the same frame, but it's better. It's interesting that this is a really popular frame and it sells really well. This is the better version and everybody forgot about it. I hope you learned something in this comparison. If there's anything I missed, drop it in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. I'll respond to most of the comments. I'll see you guys there. And I'll see you guys in the next week video, because we make a new video every week. So subscribe to the channel and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.